Good afternoon. Good afternoon. How are we doing today? Doing good. Great, great. So, how are we feeling about the course? Okay. Well, look, that's great, right? I appreciate the uh, I appreciate the glow up, but I guess what I'm asking is, how do you feel about how you're doing in the course? How do you feel about where you are in preparing? How do you feel about your understanding of the concepts? Those sorts of things. Okay. Okay. Well, that's fine. That's fine. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about this week's activity. We'll sort of crush this quickly and then move on with our lives, right? And let you guys move on with yours. Um, so we have this client, right? And the neighbor has built a very high fence, and we're being asked, what can we do about it? So, how do we advise Albert? Well, what does the fact pattern say on the on e-learning? So what do we think? Do we think that, how would we advise Albert? What are the things that we would be asking to know? There's no trespass. This is it's on the neighbor's land. The neighbor hasn't done anything unlawful. The question is, does Albert have recourse despite that? Okay, so Albert can argue that there's an interference with the enjoyment of his property, right? How does the court evaluate that argument? What questions is the court going to ask? What questions are the court going to ask as it inquires into the validity of this claim? Does it matter whether he's owed a duty of care? Is there any allegation that the neighbor has been negligent in building this fence? No, there's no allegation of negligence. Is there any allegation that Albert is visiting the neighbor? No, also correct, right? So this is not an occupier's liability case. This is not a negligence case. So there's no, so the duty of care is not an issue here. So then how would the court evaluate this claim? Okay. I'm a little concerned that there's this much silence involved here. Um, I'm a little concerned. So, okay, say this again, but say it to everyone. I, exactly, right? This is exactly the question that the court asks. Is it sensible and is it substantial? Okay. And let me start by asking, what does it mean for something to be sensible in this context? What does it mean for a claim to be sensible in this context? Detectable. Exactly right. Exactly right. So one of the things that I said in tutorials earlier today is that one puzzle with this doctrine is that it comes from older cases that make use of these terms using older usages. And so one of the things that I tell people is that when you see a court asking, is the interference sensible? You should be reading that a little bit differently. You should read it as, is the interference sensible? Sensible. Okay. But yes, exactly right. Sensible claims are those that are detectable. How do we determine that a claim is sensible? Exactly right. Exactly right. is there a reduction in the value of the land? So how do we determine that an alleged interference is substantial? Jade, you're doing so good. I hope that I want you to have more confidence in your answers, right? I've said this in a couple of different contexts, so I'm not sure if you guys have heard this, but like I've noticed a lot of times when I ask a question of students, the responses I get are expressed as questions. And that's a signal that you're not really certain about your answer and you're sort of looking to me to confirm it. And I really want to encourage you to be confident, right? When you go into court, if the learned judge says to you, Ms. Edwards Gibson, sorry, Ms. Edwards Gibson, how do we determine if the interference is sensible? And you go, well, my lord, does it reduce the value of the land? Well, the learned judge is likely to say, well, I don't know. Is that how we do it? What do you, I'm asking you what you think. And so, one of the things that I really want to encourage you guys to do is to feel comfortable in this space, in my classroom, being confidently wrong. And be confident about your answers and be willing to express them. And this is, and I want to be clear, I'm not criticizing Jade by saying this. This just happens to be where I notice this, but it's something that I notice a lot of students going on. And I really want to encourage you to be willing to be confident in your answers. You're right more often than you think. And certainly you should have the confidence of your own preparation and your own thinking. So this is a space where it's okay to be wrong. And so you should be okay, you should feel safe being confident about it. But to return to the matter at hand, you are absolutely correct that the question on sensibility is, does it reduce the value of the land? So then the question becomes, how does the court determine whether the interference is substantial? What does that mean? What does it mean for an interference to be substantial? So Jade says, does it interfere with normal human living? Exactly right, right? Normal and ordinary human living. So now let's apply that to Albert's situation. Okay. Is his neighbor's fence sensible in the way that we've described? So Jade says maybe, Teresa says no. Jade, why do you think maybe? the land is on a slope, maybe the 9 feet is appropriate. We're going to get to that in a minute. But the first question is it sensible? Okay, so apply, you gave us the standard for sensibility, apply it to Albert's neighbor. Okay, why not? Teresa says no. Teresa, why do you say no? So what's the argument that it does reduce the value of the land? Because I guarantee you, if Albert hires you, you have to be able to argue that it reduces the value of his land. So how does it, how could it reduce the value of the land? It blocks people from seeing his home. How does that reduce the value of the land? Because it blocks the view of the ocean. How does that reduce the value of the land, Destiny? Yeah, absolutely right, right? This is, you know, the argument is that the ocean view is part of the property value, okay? And that reduction in the property value makes the interference sensible under the doctrine, okay? So is it substantial? Okay, why is it substantial, Lasanta? Oh, we lost her. So Jade says, you can still have your ordinary life, so maybe it's not substantial. What is the counter argument? What's the argument that you would make on behalf of Albert? So Teresa makes the point that what if his ordinary life was looking at the ocean, right? And what if that's one of the things that draws people to this community is being close to and having access to and lines of sight to the ocean? Is this an ordinary part of life?
Sir, the ocean view. Hi, hello.
Hi, go ahead.
The ocean. Well, I don't know if someone said it because they kind of got cut off just now. But I
Sure.
would say the ocean view is a very important part of a property. Like most of the times when someone has a home facing an ocean view, is it costs way more money to pay for the property or the home or whatever the case may be. So I would say that it is substantial.
So, I mean, I think this is a really helpful point. I think that Jade is also making the point that, there's plenty of people who live their whole lives without ever seeing the ocean. And, that's, it may be tragic, but is it really unordinary? Well, maybe not, right? But this is one of the things where I want to focus on how these cases are really fact intensive, right? I think there's room for both sides to come down, right? Rashana makes the point, what if he chooses to sell the property and one of the main reasons people may want to buy is because of the ocean view? Rashana, I want to be clear that that's a really important consideration, but it goes to the question of sensibility, not the question of substantiality. Okay? So I want to be clear that that's important, but that's not, it doesn't fall under the substantiality question, right? It falls under the question of whether the value of the property has dropped. So, um, but I think that there are arguments for both sides on the substantiality question. I think we've seen both of them, and I think that, you know, the court can sort of come down. But the next piece of it is even if the court recognizes an interference, if the neighbor's action was reasonable under the circumstances, no claim lies. So this is where someone said something in the chat a few minutes ago. Maybe if the land, Jade said it, maybe if the land is on a slope, the 9-foot high fence may be appropriate. Okay. So what are some reason, you know, so maybe the building being built on a slope, right? So a 9-foot high fence actually only blocks the view of an average human into the yard, and Albert, you know, the real issue is that Albert is downslope and has been blocked from that. What are some other reasons why the neighbor's 9-foot fence might be reasonable? Right. You know, maybe we've got animals who can jump very high, right? You know, I don't know about you guys, but my cats routinely jump directly from the floor to the top of a 6-foot high bookshelf. So, you know, a 6-foot fence wouldn't keep my cats in if that was something that I was concerned about. Um, you know, privacy certainly is reasonable. Maybe, you know, maybe we had a 6-foot fence and, you know, folks were climbing over it. And so we're building a higher fence to try and deter the trespassers, right? All of these are things that might be part of the puzzle if they are, that would suggest to the court that maybe the defendant's actions are reasonable. Okay, but that's the analysis that they're going to be undertaking. They're going to be looking for the reduction in property value. They're going to be looking for, is the interference something that affects ordinary living? And then they're going to be looking for, what are the circumstances that might suggest that this is reasonable? Okay. And where the court comes down on each of those 3 steps, hard to predict at any given point, unless you happen to have a case that just fits very perfectly into a prior precedent. You will almost never have something like that, but if you do, great, congratulations, you know who's going to win. But how the court comes down on these questions is going to depend on how the court emphasizes the facts. Okay? So for your purposes, right, in terms of preparing for the exam and preparing for, you know, entering into practice as what where I come from, what we call baby lawyers, what you need to know is, you need to know that sensibility is an issue, that substantiality is an issue, and that reasonableness is an issue, and how to find out how those concepts have been applied, right? You don't have to know the specifics of what you would need to, right? How you come down on whether a given fact pattern answers the question, not that important. What's important is that you know the things that would need to go into making the decision. Okay? So what questions do you guys have about all of this? does that mean the decisions are based on the whims of judges? I mean, to some extent, yeah. No, in the sense that the judges aren't sort of explicitly being whimsical. They do sort of try and ground these decisions in their understandings of the precedent. But there's any number of decisions that, any number of judgments that make clear that there's very little in the precedent that binds judges in how they apply these sort of generic principles to different fact patterns, right? If you go through the cases in the textbook and the worksheets, you'll see a number of places where the courts say, look, these cases are very fact intensive, and it's very difficult to state sort of generic principles that apply across the board. There's always sort of something that can change the analysis. So when we say that judges make decisions, sort of as they see fit, this is not a criticism of judges or a suggestion that they're doing this maliciously. It's just a recognition that the law is not determinate, right? The law doesn't resolve everything out in the universe, and that very frequently judges decide cases based on, them trying to resolve the indeterminacies as best they can. So I don't know if that makes you feel any better about your concern. But that's the best answer that I've got. So what other questions are there? Anything else? Okay, so Jade says nothing else. Anybody else have questions? No? Okay. Last chance for questions. Going once? Going twice? Okay. So we're going to wrap up a little early, and we will call it a day. So I will see you guys tomorrow when we'll continue our conversation about trespass against the person. So take care, guys, and bye.